anyone who's put their neck out for the group,
if they've shown good effort, that's
equally as important and deserve an equally as good grade as the rest of the group.
Thought something was going horribly wrong. I really wanted to step in there.
We all wanted to have a go at everything.
Your group should come together as a whole in the end.
You can say, oh, they're awful and they don't make much effort.
It's more of a positive than a negative working in a group.
At Bournemouth, we structure the television production unit. We break it up into doing documentary in their first term and then moving on to drama in their second term. And in the third term, we concentrate solely on live television production delivered through a television studio. We spend a lot of time trying to work out how groups work. We've done that for many years. I think, like most undergraduate courses in the UK, I mean, students appear on that first day and we know a little bit about them, but not much. The difference at Bournemouth is that we interview for all of our places, so we have at least met them before. And there was some attempt at trying to form groups.
At the end of the day, we're all new to the course, and everyone's new, and you don't know what people's weaks and strengths are at the start. So basically the first year is just like kind of like a building stage, and then you learn from that. And I thought it went quite well.
Right at the start, it's more luck than anything else.
When we first got here, it was quite daunting, sort of sat in a lecture theatre and you made like there was a couple of people you'd sort of latch onto, and then it's quite daunting, so I'm glad that we were put into groups rather than having to do it ourselves.
Getting students to understand what we require of them is that's the essential dilemma of assessing work in universities, isn't it? I think all you can do is try to make the process as transparent as possible, and you do that by publishing assessment criteria. But I still think there still needs to be some flexibility in there, and I think that's what is the basis of independent learning. At the end of the day, because it's a university, not a primary school, I think it's counterproductive if we're just looking people to perform to a pro forma. We're actually looking for some initiative in there as well.
And when we were first told we were doing the peer assessment, and I was the course rep this year, I had a lot of people come to me worried about that because they maybe didn't get on with people in their groups, or there were sort of grudges because some people were better than others. There would be kind of a lot of snide comments made and people would maybe write bad things about them. But when you actually came back with a set sheet with tick boxes saying, are they organised, are they reliable, are they technically sound, or are they... That made it so much easier because it broke it all down, and when you actually did come to write your comments, you just referred back and wrote maybe a sentence or two on each of the criteria you'd given us. So there was no way that anyone could really sit there and say, they were just awful because they didn't turn up. You actually had to write something down that would prove what you've just put in the boxes. So it made it so much easier.
If we look at the key skills that we're looking for those students when they arrive for an interview to go on the course in the first place, I think those key skills we're looking for are then what we assess through criteria. We're looking for students who can communicate essentially well with other students, looking for students who can have something to say but know also when to shut up, so that they can take a leadership role within a group, but they can also then take a specific task, a production skill, and deliver that to somebody else's brief. Those are the main kind of key skills we're looking for. Students learn kind of group working skills through, again, a variety of methods. We utilise a seminar programme to teach that. So we do a seminar programme on group working skills. So I think there are certain kind of the background to things you can deal with that, some of the theory you can deal with like that, but essentially a lot of the work is done learning on the job.
I don't think you can teach how to work in a group, because every group's different. I know in our group there was a lot of clashes at the start of the year because there's maybe 3 people who were all very self-opinionated and very sort of wanted to obviously have the director role in it. And there was one person who just shrunk back but had a lot of good ideas but wouldn't air them in front of the group because they were worried that maybe other people would just stamp them out completely. And so it was quite hard at the start of the year with our group. We had a lot of trouble. But then sort of gradually everyone just starts to take their place and people realise they have to... I at the start found it quite hard to back off of things when I thought something was going horribly wrong. I really wanted to step in there and say, this is awful, let's just start again, do something different. But when you're not directing, I think you have to just suddenly... I had to just, zip up and shrink back from it, which I found really hard at the start, but I'm used to it now.
You're making and making and making, reflecting and assessing your peers' work. So, again, not overcooking the goose, but over time that sinks in and you learn a lot and you change and you can physically see the change that happens with the students when they arrive here in the first year and when they leave in the third year. When it comes down to students deciding what roles they're going to take within a particular group, I mean, at one end you've got people who think that you should just tell everybody what they're going to do, and at the other end you've got an open bun fight where people just jump in there and try and work out and smash in to get what they want. As with most of these things, I think somewhere in the middle is probably better. So I think you're allowing people the chance to make their own decisions, but you're also, as a member of staff, providing some overview to ensure that people aren't kind of like the quieter people are never going to get a role because they can't speak up for themselves. So you're trying to mediate that process of finding the job that they're going to do.
I've found that everyone works differently because this year our group there were 5 of us, so we took it in turns to direct and we took it in turns to be the sound person, the camera person. So sometimes whoever was directing the certain piece would say, right, these are my meetings, this is when I want us to meet, but more often than not we all just sort of meet weekly. Normally Wednesdays because we always finished our lectures early, so we'd always just go and have a coffee and talk about what we were doing and things.
There's a lot of dialogue around, should students work in a collaborative model, in a hierarchical model, in their production work while they're with us. And I think you utilise a number of approaches again. And students, quite often, our advice to them is to find the approach which matches the set of core skills that you've got. So it's just about finding your own place.
It works better when we fell into roles and we was role playing and it come as a cohesive unit. But I think when we did on some projects, we did collaborate a lot more, and everyone kind of chipped in on a bit of everything. And I don't think those productions worked out as well. But it's all a learning process. You need to go through those kind of things to learn by your mistakes, you know.
We think that the place of the tutor is in television production has a number of roles and comes in at a number of particular obvious points, I think. But it's about intervention, but it's about intervention at appropriate moments. And I think it's fair to say that we used a tutorial approach at the start of a project to get a project into shape, and then we would do a number of kind of staged formative assessment, I suppose, work with them over time.
I think the role of the tutors to kind of, especially at the very start of the term, because I personally come from a college where it was not a practical, the board we did was not practical work at all, so it was just essay the whole year through. So I came here and never even touched a camera or seen an edit suite or anything like that. And so from that sense, the role of the tutor for me was kind of to help you sort of know what you had to do that year, know where you had to be by the end of the year. You helped us a lot when we came and go to the tutor and sort of go through our projects and lay down our plans, because I've never had to organise a shoot or anything. I've never done anything like that. So it was nice to be able to go to your tutor and sit down with a plan in front of you and then say, well, that might not work because, your timings, or this might not work, but this works well. So it helps you sort of realise what you've got to plan for and what you haven't got to plan for.
It helps you build. This year is a building process. It prepares you for next year and the following year. And I think it's just kind of like professional feedback. It's just your group can give you a certain amount of feedback, but you need pointers in certain directions and where you're going wrong and what you're doing right.
This year we've had sort of Vim particularly came, said, well, I want to see all of the groups by sort of a week Tuesday to make sure you've got your basic idea ready or whatever. So he's sort of set quite a few sort of mini deadlines to make sure that he'd had a tutorial with all the groups to make sure they were running smoothly and chase them up a lot if they weren't. But I think within the group as well, you begin to, once you start working as a group, you begin to form your own mini deadlines just to get the work done.
One of the big issues around an assessment is about how much of it's formative, how much of it is summative. At the moment, we do our peer group assessment through a summative exercise. So the student really gets the feedback and the grade at the end of the process. It is okay to argue, I think, that process could come earlier, or there could be another stage halfway through the process maybe that was formative, and that therefore the students learning as they go through. I think that's another one of those live issues.
In my group, there's one particular person who was quite possibly the most laid-back person I've ever met, who was always late and was hardly ever turned up, but when it came to sort of the technical side of it, he was just like the best person in our group to have that done. So whenever we had a sound problem, you turned to them. Whenever you had a camera problem, you turned to them, and they'd be able to do it for you. So I think it's like a mixture of the two. You can say, oh, they're awful and they don't make much effort, but at the same time, most of our productions sort of were carried by them sometimes when we had like the technical problems when it came to editing and things. So you kind of start to rely on certain people, even if they're don't make that much effort, you still rely on them for certain things.
Degrees are awarded to individuals and not to groups. And I think if we look at the way the arc of the course goes, we are looking to freeing up individuals in that more and more it's independently assessed. And as they're engaged in group work, you've got to find ways of not just assessing their progress, but actually giving them feedback. Group assessment on the course is done through a number of ways. What we've always held on is we do a mark for the product. There's a lot of talk about product and process, obviously, in media production. At Bournemouth, we think that product is really important, and so there is a mark for product. There's also a mark given through peer group assessment, where the students mark each other. That's a part of it. And then we also ask them to critically reflect on the process and product. And we do that in a separate piece of assessment. So 3 pieces of assessment, very different pieces of assessment, are used to grade students' work.
Good idea to have the sort of the assessment from our point of view, because we are with them all the time and we see them all the time. And I know there's also the mixed feeling that sometimes maybe people think, well, if there are grudges in the group, then a lot of people were worried that they might sort of come out in their peer assessment, people might just give them a bad mark because they don't like them. But then I think that's also the role of the tutor, is that they can oversee that and think, well, maybe that's not true, because I think you must pick up on sort of who's friends with who and who doesn't like who over the course of the year, so it must become apparent when you read them.
There's a lot of talk about the fairness in peer group assessment. You quite often when you're setting things up, you get students will question you, and members of staff will question you about how fair this is. How do you moderate? How can you possibly moderate assessment that a student has done about another student while you weren't there as a member of staff, you weren't even present? How do you moderate that? Well, I suppose the answer is really that over time and the amount of assessing that they are doing amongst themselves, that is the moderation. The moderation is being done by a number of students.
At the end of the day, you see us for maybe 6 hours, maybe 12 hours a week, and not even that. And we see those guys, constantly working with them all week. And I think we know a lot more about them than maybe you do on that sort of level. So we can give more of a better description of that person and their work ethics than most probably you could.
There are times also where you need to use staff moderation on the final grades as well. And I think that, with us anyway, it's when we realised that it doesn't kind of add up, that there is some problem in terms of the way that the marks have been awarded. And that's not to say we're vetting the marks, because again, if the member of staff just comes in at the end and just says, oh, that obviously can't be right, we must change all that, then again, you're just totally, the whole process is pointless, meaningless. So what we look at is doing something with that moderation, usually in circumstances where there is something not quite right. Very rare this happens, but we get the students in and we'll open that out to discuss amongst us a version of the truth, and that's the staff moderation. And I think that's right. There will be times also where you may be aware of bullying. Sounds like a primary school term, doesn't it, to me? But where it is bullying, and there's bullying happens throughout the television industry, where strong individuals marginalise the weaker students or the less vocal students. And I think peer group assessment in that way has to be moderated by us. And I think used sensibly, it's not majorly interventionist, but it has a real value. What we're eventually looking for, and what we're trying to encourage, foster, are students who are reflective and reflexive in their practice. And I think the notion of peer group assessment and having to think about not just about how other people are performing, but how they are performing themselves in some form of self-assessment exercise, it's good. I think it's good that it gives people a sense, self-knowledge, which is what you're looking for. And it's interesting to see the people that do really well when they leave here are those people who know where they fit in a situation at a particular time, and they know that their own position and where they are will change depending on the situation. It's been able to be adapt, to be chameleon-like in the situations that you work in, and you get that through being reflective and self-reflexive throughout your time at university.
My top tips just kind of find that balance in between all the different personalities in your group, if you can find one.
Don't worry about your mark too much. Just have fun, do what you're doing, and just it's all a good experience.
You just need to be assertive and just be understanding as well, and just remember it is your first year and just enjoy it. Just have fun, really.
You shouldn't really allow problems in your group to build up, and because that will affect your work. So basically, any problems you have, make sure you air them with the group in a fair way.